This is the beautiful King's Library in the Royal Palace in Stockholm in Sweden. I'm here to talk to the scientists who've won this year's Nobel Prize. All around me are the books written by some of the greatest minds throughout the centuries, from Aristotle to Einstein. But why is it that the men and women who've brought us knowledge, inventions and innovations today are hardly known to the world? I'll be discussing that and more in Nobel Minds 2011. I'm Zainab Badawi and welcome to the King's Library and welcome to all our Nobel Laureates. I'll be talking to them about themselves and also the role of science in society today. Gentlemen, congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
I don't see any lady amongst you, so that's why I say gentlemen. So I want to ask you now, all of you, tell me, honestly, are you quite satisfied about being in the limelight, scientists like this, Nobel time, occupying centre stage? Saul?
Well, if you've ever wondered what it was like to be famous, I can report that for 1 week, it's a lot of fun, but I'm just betting that for this group of people that we'll be really glad that it's only for 1 week. I don't think any of us would want to be Brad Pitt.
What about you, Bruce?
I'd have to agree exactly with Saul. It's a very new experience. It's not unpleasant, but probably I'd like to get some work done pretty soon.
Yeah, it's life in the fast lane. I've been given a driver named Stig, which is pretty entertaining, but I'll be happy to, I think, get off the road and get back to work.
For myself, I've been a bit uncomfortable, but I love the attention that it's brought to my colleagues and to my field of science.
Danny, I mean, are you enjoying it? Come on, you're not all shy, retiring scientists who just like to stay in your laboratories all the time. It's good for you to be like this in the spotlight.
Well, not all of us are shy, but I enjoy it very much. But the question is, okay, so now we have some powers we did not have before. The question is, what do you do with it? Now we have access to decision makers. At least I have access to decision makers. And the question is, will I use it properly? I try to.
OK, well, we'll find out some more about that. Thomas, what do you think?
Well, I disagree with Saul. If I could look like Brad Pitt, I would enjoy it.
You've got a marvellous brain as well, but don't do yourself down.
I would trade everything.
Don't do yourself down, Thomas. Christopher, your fellow economist.
Well, I think that the access to decision makers is not such a big deal for us as economists, since our work has already influenced the people who are making decisions about economic policy. But winning the Nobel does give you a chance to be heard by ordinary people more in venues like this.
And that's a good thing, isn't it, Jules?
Well, I would say that I feel a little bit intimidated, more than comfortable. But I would say, like you, that I'm delighted that the fields on which we have worked and also the co-workers have been recognized by this prize. And I also feel a sense of responsibility, as you've said. So we'll see how it goes on.
OK, Bruce, I mean, what does winning the prize mean to you, and are you enjoying the attention you're getting?
Well, sometimes we work in obscurity for a very long time. That can be fun. There are rewards, certainly, to doing so. We get great satisfaction out of our work, at least I do. But it's nice to be noticed.
Chaps, be honest. Who, at the back of their mind, when they were doing all that research, thought, I think I'd quite like to win the Nobel Prize?
There's a difference between liking to win it and
or
planning.
Aiming. OK, well, you tell me, you all wanted to win it then? You all liked it, but were you aiming for it at any time, any of you?
No. I didn't even dream about it.
Yeah. Really?
No. It just wasn't on the radar for me.
And in fact, when you were awarded it, Brian, and you had a phone call at dawn in Australia, because although you're American...
Yeah, it was actually at night. So.
At night. You're American, but you've lived in Australia for the last 17 years where you've been working. You thought it was one of your students having a prank.
Well, that was my first guess, yeah. Seems like something they might do to me.
It's a total disbelief.
Yeah, it was kind of wonderment, I guess, and when you kind of sunk in, you know, the knees went weak, kind of felt sick, and then I kind of had to sit down and then walk around a little bit to come to equilibrium with it.
I was going to say, I think that the prize is often awarded for, at least in some of these fields, for a surprise. And of course, nobody plans to have a surprise. So you're very lucky when something you're working on that was on a very exciting topic that you were really enjoying working on turns out to give you something even better, a surprise that you can then, they then start thinking about as a prize. But it's not what you were designing your experiment around.
I sort of viewed the Nobel Prize sort of like the Supreme Court ruling on your work. And at some point, this is the highest level of credibility. And so I felt very good about the prize for the work for that reason, that I thought, wow, I guess this was right.
What about wanting to become a scientist? I mean, Chris, let me ask you, because actually you're an economist, which is a social science, not a natural science like the rest of the chaps here. Did you always set out saying I wanted to be an economist because you're very, very good at mathematics? Wasn't that something you wanted to do first?
Yes, when I was in high school and through most of my college years, I was thinking I would probably end up a mathematician. But I began to have cold feet in my last couple of years of college, thinking that I didn't want to be dealing with pure abstraction for the whole rest of my life.
Thomas, you, if I'm right, wanted to be a politician, didn't you, at the beginning when you were thinking about what you might want to do, and then your mother talked you out of it and thought it wasn't a respectable enough profession?
Yeah, she told me I was unlikely to win any elections.
So where do you chaps think? Where do you do your best thinking? Where do you get your eureka moment? Aha, I've discovered this groundbreaking theory.
The shower.
The shower, Adam.
Yeah.
Adam, the shower for you too, Saul?
That works for me too.
Shower for you too, Brian.
And in my vineyard, place where you can forget about everything else and just think.
Oh yeah, because you make wine, don't you?
But
So
not.
the
I
wine
don't drink the wine.
You don't drink the wine. You just make it.
Doesn't work so
So
well.
your vineyard and your shower,
Yeah.
Brian. There must be very invigorating showers. Something in the water.
Well, the writing in the chalkboard sort of runs a little bit.
I would say hiking.
You would say hiking,
I'd say
Jules.
the same. I'd say exactly the same. Walking, hiking.
Yeah.
What, sort of on a flat area? You don't want anything too strenuous,
Nothing
surely?
too strenuous. You're thinking only about where your next breath comes from, but hiking on the seashore by a lake.
Bruce, is that because nature inspires you in some way?
Maybe it's kind of relaxing anyway. It's a diversion, and walking and thinking just go well for me together.
Christopher Sims, where do you think?
I tend to walk around the house in circles.
Do you?
When I'm trying to write, I'll sit there and be unable to get any words out or unable to finish getting a model to solve, and so I'll get up and start pacing around.
But it must be a bit odd, though, just walking around the house. I mean, what do your family think?
I do it mostly when they're not around.
Thomas, do you think the same as Chris?
No, actually, so for me, it's actually when I'm with somebody, either a co-author or a student or at a seminar, where they're telling me something I thought was wrong, and that stuns me and gets me thinking.
You sort of spark off somebody. Saul Perlmutter?
I was just going to say that I think that there's also different kinds of thinking that you end up doing, and there's the quiet contemplative part that we're mostly describing here, the part that you have to be completely lost in, you're just thinking in the background. But there's also, I think, at least a big fraction of what I do is with other people. That I'd say that it's the brainstorming with 2 or 3 people in a room and just bouncing ideas back and forth. That's where some of the best ideas come from.
All of you, apart from Jules, are from the United States. Dan Shechtman, you're from Israel, but you're also an American citizen. And that's more than a coincidence, isn't it? I mean, Adam, why do you think it is that the United States has had the lion's share of the Nobel Prizes? Is it something about the American culture or something?
Well, I think in the American culture, but also in science, there's a lot of entrepreneurialism. And when you go out and you do an experiment, you have an idea, it really is like a startup business. I mean, you have to marshal the resources, you have to convince other people, collaborators instead of investors. Then you have to carry it off well, monitor that. You have to communicate your message well, so there's messaging. And so these are things that we're pretty good at in the past in the US.
But can I try this idea on you, Adam, that, you know, we heard one Nobel Prize-winning economist, Amartya Sen, say many years ago his famous theory that there's been no famine in a country which lacks freedom, which has freedom of expression, freedom of speech. How important do you think it is to have the free flow of information, the freedom of expression, the freedom to think? And to that extent, if that is absent, does that act as a constraint on people making discoveries?
Right, I think that's a very important point. That, again, what we all do is we all ask questions, and then we seek answers to those questions. And if you're in a society that is not comfortable with asking questions, just that act of questioning dogma or doctrine, that would be very difficult, because that is how we proceed in science.
Brian Schmidt.
Yeah, as someone who's grew up in the United States and now has done their research in Australia, I can see the differences. And one of the big things that the United States has done well is they have critical mass. They have people you can go through and talk to about your ideas. They have the resources to empower you to do your work. And so that investment has been a real important thing, and one of the reasons the U.S. has been so
Investment
successful.
in resources, I think people understand that. But I mean, this idea of the concept of the freedom to think outside of the box. Jules? You're the only European. You're French.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm listening to you. I'm really wondering. I mean, of course, Europe. If we look at Europe as a whole, the resources are similar, rather similar to the ones of the United States. So freedom exists in Europe just as much, I believe, as in the United States. But it's this entrepreneurial system which you mentioned, which might be somewhat different, and. So yes, I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not half Americans here and half Europeans, but maybe some other year. But I'm not sure that this will has to last forever. But probably Europe has to change.
Danny?
Yeah, I want to add one thing to the greatness of the United States. And these are the national laboratories. In the United States, there are a good number of national laboratories that have been sponsored for very many years and established themselves as experts in certain fields. And for me, at least, that was extremely important.
Saul Perlmutter?
For me as well. I was at one point thinking about the fact that I think for many of these kinds of projects, having a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of freedom to try out ideas without an immediate need for a result makes a huge difference. Because if you were told, we need to know what day are you going to have your results, and we'll cut off your funding at the end of those 2 years, 3 years. In our case, it took 10 years to get the answer. And I don't think any of us would have easily dived into a project or gotten the funding to do a project that was a 10-year project, but I don't think any of us were disappointed at having done so.
Saul Perlmutter and your fellow physicists, I mean, basically you were given the prize for your theories on that the expansion of the universe is accelerating.
For our measurements.
Measurements are, sorry, yes, do correct me, certainly. Adam and Brian, you were working together, although you're in Australia and you're in the United States. But Saul, you were their competitor, weren't you? How important is competition versus collaboration when it comes to making a discovery?
I think this particular topic was a great example where the two you get to see the strengths of both at the same time. So you don't have to choose. In our case, I'd say that within a team, people were very collaborative, worked very closely together, and we wouldn't have done anything without this really strong group of people that were in both teams, international in its nature. So we were on the phones and emails and occasional video conferences, all the time. But we also had all the advantages of having a really tough competition going on, where if we did anything wrong, we would know about it very quickly, and vice versa.
Yes, I agree with that. It made us work hard, it made us work fast, and at the end, we knew if we got the wrong answer, they would let us know. So, we really lights a fire under you.
Christopher Sims?
The competition, more broadly, is another special characteristic of the U.S. And I think a difference between the U.S. and Europe, at least until very recently, that we have all these different kinds of institutions of higher education in the United States, private universities, state universities, and we have faculty will move amongst universities to get better support, and most other countries, the academic system is not so open and competitive. And I think that makes a huge difference. People with new ideas, if their university doesn't help them out, and some other university understands that they've got a new idea that could make a big impact, they can move, and they do, and that's a very important part of what makes our system work well.
Especially for the young people, right?
Yes,
the fact that they don't have to wait to become the senior professor in order to be, supported and working.
Christopher, you mentioned something there. You talk again the comparison about the United States versus other countries, but there is a bit of a paradox actually here, because when you look at the United States and you look at the role of science in American society, yes, you do produce all these wonderful Nobel laureates, and yet when you look at the politicians, I mean, take the Republican presidential candidate race. You've got a lot of the candidates there trying to become win the nomination, really being quite anti-science. I mean, one hopeful, Rick Perry, said, evolution, well, that's just a theory out there. There are some gaps in it. You've got them questioning climate science. You've got them questioning stem cell research. Newt Gingrich as a front runner now, saying that he has doubts about stem cell research and so on. So it's sort of anti-science and yet pro-science at the same time. How come? Who's going to venture an answer?
I have a theory of that.
Go on.
It's because
Thomas Sargent.
In high school, you physicists grade people too hard. So American voters get uncomfortable with science, and then so they like to hear that evolution is a bad theory. That's my theory.
But why do you think that somebody running for high political office in the United States is anti-science?
They know better. They're pandering to ignorant people.
But 45% of the American population, according to one particular opinion poll, also had doubts about evolution.
Well, those are the people they're pandering to. But if you get, I'll make you a bet, you get any of those Republican candidates in a room with these guys, they're not going to deny the theory of evolution. They're not that stupid.
They're uncomfortable with the outcome of the science, and we are too as well. I mean, when scientists study the trends in the global climate and find it's going to get warmer if we don't make changes, I mean, that's bad news. But I think we as scientists say, okay, we've used our expertise, the best knowledge we have, the best data we have, and we're telling you this is what the best analysis says, and we think that decision makers should respect that process and take that as the starting point. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Rather than turn it around, which unfortunately I think many of them do, not liking the answer and then deducing backwards, well, I don't believe that. I don't know what their data is, but they don't show it. Somehow they use their gut feel when I really think they're unhappy with the result.
So there's a lack of scientific literacy, and one of the important parts of scientific literacy is understanding uncertainty. Every theory has holes, but they're not very big. And so the question is, how sure are you? Are you 99% sure, or are you 99.99999% sure? And so not understanding the difference between those two things is a big problem within the broader public, and we do understand it.
Saul Perlmutter?
I think that one of the things that we all sort of learned as scientists at some point or other is how easy it is for a human being to fool him or herself. That it's very easy for us to fall in love with an idea, fall in love with a concept, and then everything we see, we think can prove it. And a lot of what we learn as scientists at some point in our science training is how to catch ourselves making mistakes. And so we're always looking for the ways that we're wrong. And we were just like anybody else in that respect, that we would fall in love with an idea. It's just that I think the more literate you are in science, I think the more you recognize that, and you try and discount it, and you try and figure out ways to catch yourself and improve your ideas, rather than just keep believing something that just because you like it.
Dan Shechtman?
Yeah, I think that there is a missing link between the scientists and the public, and that missing link is the media. People listen to what they are told on television, on radio, and it's the role of the media to give the audience the scientific truth. It doesn't add to rating, there's no money there, but you are the people who can make the difference.
You're blaming us now for the politicians ignoring the scientists?
I don't blame anybody. I challenge you to bring the scientific truth to the public. And when you do that, you know that you have done something really great for humanity.
So you're saying then, Danny Shechtman, that the politicians would not be able to disregard what the scientists say on stem cell, climate science, evolution or whatever, if they were better educated about science, and that the media has a role to play in that.
A major
You
role.
think? A major role. Okay, but I want to say to you something, though. You can't just blame us, because you gentlemen and other scientists, you write about your subjects in a very, very difficult way. A bit elitist, am I right in saying that?
We use special language, but I agree with Danny. It would be wonderful if, you know, the next time Saul wrote a paper in the Astrophysical Journal, there was a story about it on, you know, CNN or the BBC explaining what it was about, but that doesn't often happen. Otherwise, you could lead the public by the hand through the various steps of what we've learned.
You're a physicist, Adam Riess. When did you write a simple editorial in a mainstream newspaper? You write your articles for your fellow scientists, don't you?
Well, so I
Is
have a
that true
version.
or not?
I have a version there, and then when I work with the media and press people, then we write a translation, and that is put out to the
Why
media.
can't you talk like that all the time? I want to ask Bruce Beutler here, because, Bruce, you enjoyed writing.
Yes.
And you actually, at the beginning, when you started your science studies, wrote in a kind of flowery way, and then you were told, hang on. You started
Yes,
writing
that's
in a
right.
more terse, scientific way. But, I mean, look, The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, 1860, scientific, but beautifully written. Why can't you write in an accessible way?
We
all of
have
you?
page limits, we have word limits. So we have to be terse, we have to be very precise, so there's no ambiguity about what we mean. There are limitations. But as to the whole problem, the larger problem that we're discussing, I think it's one of culture. I just think that there's less popular interest in science, even though it's brought us almost everything in the world around us. It's brought us our whole modern way of life, and yet people don't find it as exciting as sporting events, let's say, or as rock concerts. It's rare that scientists are popular icons.
But is that your fault? To some extent, you bear responsibility for that? Put yourselves forward. You all said, oh, we're enjoying our time in the limelight in Nobel Week, but after a week, we're happy to go back to our ivory towers. Didn't you all say that?
I think it's more a societal choice than
Except
it's
you.
our fault.
Don't believe it.
Jules Hoffmann, you wanted to come in here?
There's another paradox between the United States and Europe, which always strikes me. In Europe, the Poles give a very great confidence for science. So we wouldn't have those 45%, but 90 or so percent respect science, believe in what scientists do, and so on. But when you go to the other aspect, and we take, for instance, genetically modified crops, the Americans, who in terms of science are less confident, they accept it, and the French would not, hardly. So there's this.
Why do you think
again,
that is? What's your explanation for that?
It's probably again the entrepreneurial aspect of, the crops are
There's an
economic.
ethics question on those as well. I think, from my experience,
Yeah.
is that where things are that's a cultural issue. I think. Of
But it's still,
ethics.
the question I put to you was, given that, as you all said, scientific advancement brings humankind so many solutions to big problems. Starvation, scientists, geneticists, plant breeders are developing crops which are drought resistant and flood resistant and so on. You help feed people and so on. Why is it that scientists don't engage more with wider society and try to disseminate your findings, your theories? Brian Schmidt.
So we need to, I segregate my life into two parts. The public side, where I try to speak in language people can understand, and I do write things for newspapers and things occasionally.
Glad to hear it.
But I do need to communicate with my fellow scientists in our language, because that is at a level which is for the specialists. So we need to work both sides of the fence. You cannot do it once like Charles Darwin can, unless you write the first book of the subject.
But don't you think you've done more writing to your fellow peers at the expense to the wider public? Is that a fair comment of mine, Saul Perlmutter?
Well, my impression is that many of my colleagues are excellent communicators and actually do write. I've also written for more popular audiences, but not every person, that's their best skill. I have other colleagues who are great scientists, and it would be a real loss to society if they weren't discovering the things they were discovering. Yet they barely can communicate to me, let alone to a popular audience. And you can't expect every human being to be able to do every function all at the same time. I mean, I have to find I go to a barber because they can cut my hair better than I can. So once again, you want those scientists who can communicate to communicate as best they can to learn.
Adam Riess?
Yeah, well, I also want to say that generally the way scientists do finally try to communicate their findings to decision makers is in bodies like the National Academy of Sciences or something like that. We're called on to come together, reach consensus, write a report, and give this to the decision makers. What's very disappointing is on many of these topics, global climate change, evolution, energy, those reports have come out and decision makers have in many cases said, I don't like that answer. And that's where I think that they, in many cases, are failing to respect the expertise and the process by which this information has arrived. It's our best estimate, and they should not be so quick to overturn it if they don't like the answer.
Christopher Sims, I want to bring you in here.
I think that if all these guys wrote for the popular press twice as much, I don't think it would make a huge difference. And it's because people choose what they want to spend their time listening to. And in fact, the way the media are fragmenting today so that everybody can pick the particular kind of outlet they want to look at on the internet, a newspaper or a website that's full of science by these guys won't get very many people, won't get very many clicks.
But Chris,
and people can have the option of spending the whole day looking at information about rock stars and movie stars and reading People magazine. And a lot of people do.
Yeah, but sure, but Chris...
nothing these guys say will get through to them.
No, but Chris Sims, if you look at your discipline, economics, social science, not a natural science, but still calling it science, the economic and financial crisis in Europe, North America, around the world, has in a sense made everybody interested in economics. This is your moment for the economists to really engage with society. But when you said, or when Adam said that scientists do have access to politicians and so on, and they say, look, this is our best estimate and so on and so forth, when it comes to economics, it's a pretty confusing message that we get from the economists, let's face it. On the one hand, some economists say this, other economists are advising that. You all have disparate views. And so in a sense, that undermines your discipline, doesn't it? Because there isn't a coherent message about what you should do.
There's more of a coherent message than you might think. It's for example, let's talk about the U.S. budget situation, which everybody agrees is a difficult and disturbing situation. If you got Republican and Democratic leaning economists together, the top ones from universities around the U.S., and ask them to hammer out a proposal for what to do about that, you would get some disagreement and argument in that group, but it wouldn't be over the things that the politicians are arguing about now. There's the range of options that we have is pretty clear. There's some disagreement about exactly what to do, but the proposals that are actually being put forward in the political arena have almost nothing to do with the real range of options we have.
All right, this is your moment, Chris Sims. Everybody wants some kind of solution. Europe, we've got the Eurozone crisis. North America, United States, heavily indebted. What would your key advice, in a nutshell, be? It's obvious. I mean, you've got the magic bullet, have you? Magic bullet answer?
I don't have the magic bullet. I said there would be arguments, there would be discussion, there's a range of options. What to do in Europe is there are complicated political issues about how to resolve this crisis in Europe. So I don't have a nutshell solution.
But is the economics clear? You're saying the economics of what to do is clear. It's just that for politically expedient reasons, the politicians may not be able to do it.
In Europe, political expedience is not the right word. There are real different interests involved here. The problem is to get the political compromises that are necessary made. That's always difficult.
Okay, well, let me ask you, simply, Thomas Sargent, you're an economist, and there's an economic crisis. What would your answer be?
So just to pursue this, what Chris said was just take the example of the is there a single unique answer that's going to satisfy everybody about what to do about the Greek debt crisis? The answer is no, because some people are going to have to pay and some people are going to benefit, and they're different people. And the people, most people are going to like solutions that benefit themselves.
Who benefits and who doesn't?
Well, I'll just give you an example. If the German government the taxpayers for Germany bail out the people who are holding Greek debt, those taxpayers suffer, and the people who are holding Greek debt get a big capital gain. So there's different interests. So you can't get unanimity. You can't get Chris can't give you a silver bullet that's going to satisfy everybody. There's conflicts of interest. That's why he said compromise. So the role of economics is to lay out what the dimensions along which compromises have to be made. In the United States, there's people who say, I will not compromise.
Chris Sims, if President Obama, Timothy Geithner, US Treasury Secretary, they call you in and say, OK, we've got this problem. We've lived well beyond our means. We're heavily in debt. What do you think we should do, Christopher Sims? What would your answer be?
Increase some taxes, decrease some expenditure, do most of that in the future. Right now...
do that in the future, you would say to them. Don't do it now.
You have to now convince people that you're going to do it in the future, which means getting some legislation through Congress. Most of the legislation that's gone through, most of the proposals that are in Congress now are about doing things 2 or 3 years down the road to improve our budget situation. But in the short run, we're in the midst of a deep recession, and it doesn't make sense to do drastic increases in taxes or cuts in expenditures now.
Because it would stifle growth too much. And
I think so. Now here, my judgment would be that it would be a good idea to be more stimulative now, to tolerate a little bit of inflation now, but to do that safely, you have to have in place a credible plan for handling our long-term budget problems. Now, these proposals I could make to President Obama, and he and his advisors probably would agree. The trouble is President Obama doesn't have by himself the political power to just implement these things. It has to go through Congress, and there things in the United States right now seem to be in a stalemate.
And there's an election coming up, a presidential election next year. So do you think that therefore such decisions are going to be parked?
It looks like that may be the way it's going to turn out, and it's unfortunate. Unfortunate for the economy and for the American people. Are
you, briefly, optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the global economic crisis?
Optimistic.
You're optimistic,
Absolutely.
Thomas Sargent. Christopher Sims?
Depends on what time scale we're talking about. I'm optimistic, certainly in the long run. In the short run, I'm nervous.
Okay. I mean, all of you, the natural scientists here, I mean, we're talking here about how science, economic science, can help address global challenges, a major global challenge. Surely that's a huge raison d'etre for you as scientists, that you justify your work, all the research money that's gone into it, you justify the prizes that you've been awarded by the fact that you do address the global challenges of our time. Take, when it comes to medicine, the cure for cancer, something which President Nixon 40 years ago says, we're going to try and find a cure for cancer. We're still trying to work towards that. How far do you think that your research as scientists has to be driven by these utilitarian considerations, not just science for science's sake? Saul Perlmutter and then Brian Schmidt.
And I think some of the examples that you were giving of things that you want to achieve, there's a very odd thing about the way science seems to have worked in the past, and I assume will work in the future, which is that you often get the most impressive, amazing results, and we become more capable as a society when you go for the fundamentals, when you try to understand how the world really works at some very deep level without immediately trying to solve the problem. And then somehow magically, it's always been the case that when we understand something more about how the world works, it empowers us. We end up being able to do more than we ever could have done if we'd just gone directly to the goal. You would never invent a laser printer if you were just sitting out there trying to figure out how to build a printer. You would never invent GPS just by trying to figure out how are you going to find our way around the world.
Because GPS built on the theory of Einstein's theory.
Einstein's
he didn't foresee the fact that
exactly.
that would happen.
General relativity
so
feels
you're
like
saying
it's a
the
very
building
abstract,
blocks, the building blocks to a cure for cancer or whatever, you are putting those in place now, even though you can't. Brian Schmidt?
Yeah, we may be, and we have this building blocks of the basic research, and then you need to have another layer of innovation on top of it, but you never know where the next big idea. If you're trying to invent the better toaster, the only thing you're going to do is invent a better toaster. If you can go through and revolutionize your understanding by just finding an idea where you didn't expect it, that is what basic science brings.
Why don't all scientists working in this field say collectively we're going to try to find that cure for cancer, because it just afflicts so many people all around the world, and make that your goal?
Well, many do. There are large collaborative efforts of that type. In biology, there's a wide spectrum of work, from the very basic to what we now call translational research. So there are people...
What do you mean by translational research?
Translational research means we have a great deal of knowledge accumulated now. Let's use it to try to create new therapies. And some people work at all levels of this scale. Jules and I certainly are more toward the basic end of the scale, but we're mindful of public expectations, and definitely all of our work is relevant downstream to applications like cancer therapy, treating inflammatory disease, and many other conditions.
Jules, did you want to say something here?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I mean, I was going to say that as regards cancer, many laboratories work on cancer without even highlighting, without even say they work on cancer, because it's a basic problem of cell biology, you see. And in that sense, I think the whole community of cell biologists and of molecular biologists has to progress together, and then one day we will understand how to treat it.
Because there are hundreds of forms of cancer, aren't there?
Absolutely. But they are all they are disorder in cell division and cell metabolism.
Dan Shechtman, I want to bring these two thoughts together with you, because you've made this discovery on the formation of quasi-crystals, and I want to ask you first of all whether you know what future applications there might be of your discovery, and also, having made this discovery, has it given you more access to politicians, the political leaders in Israel? Are they beginning to listen to you now in a way perhaps they never had done before?
Well, yes. Unlike the people from the economic field who have access to politicians, it is relatively new to me, and our politicians tell me that, yes, please tell us what you think, we would like to listen to you. Do they listen? That's another question. but they invite me to talk to them, and I had, and I will. And hopefully I can make some difference. But let me say something which I think is common to all of us. We are, as scientists and economists, we discover, we develop, and we provide information and tools for the politicians. They can use it the right way, they can use it the wrong way. Nuclear energy is one example, economy is another example. You can talk to them, you can give them the tools, but at the end of the game, they are the decision makers, and they use the information the way they want it. So it has to do more with sociology and psychology, and the media has a role here.
You're back to us media. But let me ask you, on your quasi-crystal theory, are you worried at all that it might be used in the future in a harmful way?
I don't see how you can use it in a harmful way, and I hope that other people do not see it either.
But as Saul Perlmutter said, though, who would have thought that the laser, invented in 1960, built on the theories of Einstein in the 1920s, would be used in eye surgery or in DVD players? You don't know, do you?
No, I don't. We don't know. We open a gate and let everybody go through and look at the garden and pick the flowers and see what are the possibilities. And we all do the same thing.
As Nobel laureates, I'll ask you something that Einstein famously said, that if you haven't made a great discovery as a scientist by the time you're 30, forget it. I don't think I'd be upsetting any of you if I said, you are all over 30, aren't you? Do you think scientists get better with age, or was Einstein right, that you need that madness of youth, the idealism to carry out the crazy experiments and really break through frontiers? Adam Riess.
Well, I think science is a set of different skills, and I would say over time I've gotten better at some of them. I'm probably wiser, my intuition is better, and I'm probably worse at others. My memory used to be so good. Every fact, every page I read, I had at my fingertips, and I've lost some of that. So, you know, the balance changes. I couldn't say when I'm more likely to make a discovery, although I made mine when I was 28, so it does.
You made yours when you were 28?
I was
Oh, so
30.
Einstein was right.
And I was 30.
You were 30, Brian Schmidt.
But I think the thing that I had back then was time. I had an unfragmented life where I could focus on one thing and one thing only. And that's something Adam is still very good at, is focus, and that's important.
Jules and Dan Shechtman, you are the two older Nobel laureates around this table. What's your question?
Are we?
Yeah, well, yes. Sorry to say that, but yes. But I mean, you know, these discussions we're having all over Europe, North America about retirement age and so on. Do you think scientists get better with age, Jules Hoffmann?
Well, again, I mean, I'm repeating what you said. Some people said being a scientist takes 4 or 5 aspects of your life. You see, it's from, and some of them, I would say, are not as good at 70 as they were at 40. Others are better. I mean, you get certainly better in having some distance from the direct question and so on, selecting aspects which you want to develop, which should be developed, and so on. You have a better view of the whole of the field with age. But then again, yes, memory decreases, and also maybe some of the stamina which you have at the age of at your age of 30 or 40 and so on, you become more.
I'm sure your stamina is wonderful, Jules. All that walking you were telling us about that you were doing earlier on. Dan Shechtman.
Yeah, I will skip talking about the physiology, which I agree, of course. But there's another factor. As we go up in the academic levels, there is more and more administration. So we spend a lot of time as administrators. The best time to do studies is when you're a student. No administration at all. And in the first year, there is no administration. Then each and everybody else can tell you, I mean, we were nominated for the Nobel, right? We nominate other people for many prizes. It takes time. It takes time to write all these pages and to study. And this is just one example. There's the university administration, there's the local science administration, there's the global science administration. It takes more and more of our time. So regardless of whether we are still bright or not, the time that we can allocate for doing this science is less and less as we grow up.
Okay, let me go around the table then and just say, you've all, gentlemen, won this marvellous accolade, the Nobel Prize. You've proved yourself. You don't have to prove yourselves anymore. What are you going to do now? Is there life after Nobel for you? Thomas Sargent, economist.
Of course you have to prove yourself. First you have to prove yourself in your daily life with your wife. I mean, the prize doesn't mean anything for how you treat other people in your daily life. And then with your students and your colleagues, you probably have to prove yourself a little more because of the time thing. They think you're not spending the time.
Okay. Christopher Sims, briefly all of you. Christopher.
Yes, I think I'm going to go back to doing research, and I agree with Tom. There's a little worry that students think, well, that guy has the Nobel Prize, he's going to be so busy running around the world giving advice that I better do my dissertation research with somebody else. So you have to work at convincing them.
That's
not
true. With you, Chris and Thomas, as the economists, you are going to be sought after greatly. Jules Hoffmann, you won the prize for medicine and physiology.
Yeah, I would like to continue the way I've been working over the last years, and so I would not like to change completely now. And so, as you said, as we all said, the Nobel Prize doesn't change us. It changes the view people have on us, you see. So be careful, calm, and continue as we did before.
Bruce Beutler.
Well, along the lines of what people have said, I think we're under greater scrutiny than ever before. And certainly we have to prove ourselves every day. I hope that I can relate to people in the same way that I did before. That's really important to running a lab, to running a group of people and trying to solve problems.
So the three physicists, Brian Schmidt.
So for me, it's a matter of finding a balance between the responsibility to society and to myself as a scientist. And it's also, I guess the one part I'm worried about is I'm always someone who has not minded being wrong. And as a Nobel Prize winner, suddenly people seem to think that you're not allowed to be wrong. And of course, I go out and I'm happy to be wrong.
We're going to hang on your every word from now on.
That's a worry of mine.
Adam Riess.
Well, I'm still young, so I'm thinking I'm going after a second Nobel Prize. But I think I'm going to go.
Possible?
Well, I'm going to go for it in economics because it looks like that's where all the action is. But no, seriously, our research, we found the universe is accelerating, but we found there's a new component, very likely, called dark energy, and it's created a bigger question, and that's when science is the funnest, is it leads you somewhere else. And so in this case, it's led us to want to understand this dark energy, and I plan to continue research in that area.
Saul Perlmutter.
I would say that we're just right in the middle of such an exciting program of trying to figure out what is going on that we obviously have a lot of work to do, and we want to bring other people in now to work on it. But at the same time, it's also true that we only found out just weeks ago that we have a Nobel Prize, and we don't know what things we might feel like we want to be able to help with and do differently during this next year as well. So ask us again in a year, and we'll probably know better.
All right, and finally, briefly, Dan Shechtman, is there life after Nobel professionally?
Yes, and I can tell you what I plan to do. I will dedicate more time than before, and I had before, dedicated time to promote education, to promote science, and to promote technological entrepreneurship in Israel and in the world.
Thank you very much indeed, Danny. And thank you to all our Nobel laureates, and congratulations to you once again. I think, in keeping with the spirit of the Nobel Prize, we've asked some pretty big questions and at times come up with some pretty big answers. We've also gained some insights into how these great brains think. Thank you to you, wherever you are in the world. And from me, Zainab Badawi, at the King's Library in the Royal Palace in Stockholm in Sweden. Goodbye.